Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. Okay, I say this every week. I'm excited about my guest this time because she came very well recommended through one of my dearest friends. And when Eric Easter makes a recommendation, I listen, and you should too. My guest is author and award-winning independent producer, Essie Chambers. With an MFA in creative writing from Columbia University and fellowships from MacDowell, Vermont Studio Center, and Baldwin for the Arts, Essie is a storyteller with a diverse background. She was a television and film producer, having worked for Paramount and BET, among others. And you may know her for producing the Oscar shortlisted documentary Descendant. You can watch it right now on Netflix. And it was released by the Obama's Higher Ground production company and Netflix in 2022. And it has received critical acclaim. It's been nominated for the 2023 PGA Awards and 2023, I think it's INOCA. She's going to tell me if I said that right. So Essie recently debuted her novel. It is called Swift River. What a beautiful read. It's a family saga that follows Diamond Newberry as she grapples with her identity, uncovers her father's hidden history, and navigates the complexities of race and family in a declining New England mill town. So we're going to have Essie talk to us about this book and about all the work that she's been doing. I'm very excited. So please join me right now in welcoming Essie Chambers.
Hello.
Hi. I'm proud of you. I just have to say.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You know, I'm a writer, but a nonfiction writer.
Right.
And when I find writing fiction and novels to be scary, just the idea of, oh my goodness, how did you develop these characters and the incredible detail with which you describe everything. So, and I'm wondering, because looking at your history, because you worked in television and film, do you think that informed the detail in your writing?
Oh, absolutely. And first I want to say, I also am terrified of writing.
Oh, are you?
It's a scary thing. Well, it requires so much truth telling and access to hard things, and and sharing it with the world. So I think the first thing I ever wanted was to write books long before I got into TV and film. And I kind of pointed myself in the direction of it. And I had this really, I was a TV exec at Paramount for years, as you said. And I kind of learned much of what I know about storytelling through a visual medium. Yes. So I think for sure that detail, I tend to see a scene first and then kind of go back in and figure out how the characters get from one place to another. But I'm a really visual writer. And I think also just story structure really comes from that experience as well. It's like you have to be really disciplined to tell a story in 30 minutes or 120 minutes, and so I feel like that has really helped as well.
Well, as I began reading, a few things happened. So for people who love to read, you're going to love to read this book. For people who like to read fast, it's not going to work. You can't do it fast. You have to breathe. You have to sit with the page and experience. Like each sentence is an experience. I feel like you take us in to whatever you're showing us. And we live in a culture where everything is so fast. And I like that you can't read your book fast. I think you have to be willing to invest in being with the book.
That's beautiful. Thank you. There are people that devour it quickly, but I think it depends on how you're reading it. Yeah. Okay. I think what you just said about the sentences, I really fought for every sentence. It took me a long time to read this book.
How long did it take?
Oh goodness. It was like 9 years it took me to write. Cause I was writing around the edges of my career and my work. I think I was probably scared to finish it a little bit. I think it was a hard book to write because, I was writing about painful things, but I also wanted to do it in a way that there was joy and all of that had to come through the voice of this character. And so, with her as the filter, every sentence really, I really agonized over her.
Well, and you can, well, so I won't say that the reader knows that you agonize. What I will say is the care that you put into the descriptions of everything. I mean, it's really special, I would say. I read a lot and talk to a lot of authors. And as I said, I'm a writer myself. And I teach people public speaking. And so, Essie, my number one lesson is paint a picture with your words.
That's right.
And that is what you did with every word and every sentence in this book. So let's tell through your words, if you would tell everybody who's tuned in, what is Swift River about?
So Swift River, I call it kind of like a coming of age story wrapped in like the sweeping family saga. It is centered around this 16-year-old girl named Diamond Newberry. Starts the summer of 1987. She is living with a very troubled mother in this kind of crumbling New England mill town. They are very isolated by ways that they stand out in this town. Diamond is biracial. Her mom is white. They don't drive, so they hitchhike everywhere they go. Diamond is teased relentlessly about her weight. And really the primary thing is that since her father disappeared 7 years ago, she's the only Black person in all of this town. And so in the course of this summer, what will happen is, I started out to write this coming of age story, and through the course of some research, which I can talk about in a minute, it really became a story about finding your roots and being rooted. And she discovered, she heard from a family member that she'd never known before. Her family had secrets. This town had a hidden history, and she had this really rich ancestral legacy and inheritance. And so her journey is really about finding these roots in her town and in her family.
Yeah, it's layered, the storytelling.
Yeah.
And I like that too, because it also makes you think. I want you to talk a little bit about the research that it takes, even though it's a novel. For good novels, there's got to be a lot of truth and anchoring in whatever the context is. And there's so much information in this book, like a failing mill town we know throughout the United States with technology changes, what has occurred, and so many communities have fallen for lots of different reasons. But what was the research process like for you?
I mean, it was pretty exhaustive. I actually grew up in a former mill town, but it wasn't rural in the way that I wanted this community to be. And I think I wanted to really understand. I mean, there is something very particular about a place where the industry and the thing that anchors the town leaves, and how the place is haunted by that. Obviously they're financially and the socioeconomics of it, but also, I just wanted to paint pictures of those old crumbling factory buildings and, kind of like skeletons all over, dotting the landscape. And they're haunted places in a lot of ways. And so I did a lot of research about the communities, as when they were thriving with the mills at the center, and then what happened when they would leave. And specifically, I wanted to figure out, my main character's father is Black, and I wasn't sure in the beginning whether or not I wanted him to have been, born in this town or been a transplant. And I really had to go looking for information. I decided I wanted him to have a family history there. And I had to figure out like what Black folks in this kind of, in rural New England in the early 20th century, what would that look like? And so I did a ton of research there and made some really interesting discoveries.
And so you put Diamond and her mother in this town, Swift River, with Diamond being the only person of color in the whole town.
Yes.
Did this actually happen anywhere? Were there places where all the Black people were gone?
Well, yes. I mean, I will say I grew up in a town that I was not the only Black person. I was a handful. So I had not quite as extreme an experience as Diamond, but I did understand what it meant to be one of very few people of color in an all-white town. But I think that where that kind of experience really crystallized for me, I was in the process of doing this research, and I came across sundown towns. I'm sure you're familiar
Right.
with what a
But
sundown
yeah,
town.
but let folks know what that is.
Yeah, so sundown towns historically are all white towns by design. So they're basically, white folks have created them either by, with racist laws and ordinances, or violence and terrorism and murder. And the name itself comes from the practice of putting a sign, often right next to the welcome sign of the town, that would say, if you are Black and passing through by day, that's fine. But if we catch you here after the sun sets, you will be hurt or killed. And I'm saying that nicely. That's as nicely as the sign said. And so this book that I found is called Sundown Towns: The Hidden Dimension of American Racism. It's actually, I think, the only history on sundown towns that exist. Sundown towns show up in, as we know, in literature and movies, and
Right.
there are books that have incorporated. But I, as far as I know, there's no book on the history aside from this. And what surprised me, I always thought of sundown towns as something that was mostly in the South, and I found out that it was primarily in the North that these towns were popping up. Did you know? I mean,
I did not. I in researching you, I saw an interview where you talked about that, and I was like, what? Because people mistakenly believe that racism only existed in the South, that slavery only existed in the South, all these things that aren't true. In some ways, I think it was worse in the South, or at least more blatant, but this is something I'd never heard of.
I didn't either. I mean, like I said, I thought it was in the South, and through this book discovered thousands and thousands of these towns were created between 1890 and the 1960s. And, like Ohio was a sundown. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they exist today. I mean, that the premise really is, anytime you come across an all white town, it's on purpose. And we know that, and we feel that, and, like things like the Green Book were created to make it so that, people of color could know where it was safe to move around as they traveled. And so this was incredibly pervasive in the North, in part in response to the Great Migration. So and
like what's happening now with people coming from other parts of the world, and America saying, no, don't come in. It's that the Great Migration probably felt like that.
Yeah.
Where are these people coming from? Why are they coming to my town?
An invasion. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's something. And so Diamond is a girl. How old is she in 1987?
She's 16.
Because I know you go back and forth with her age, but so 16 is such a tender age. I mean, you're curious about everything and incredibly self-conscious. And as you say, she is a heavy girl. So people are seeing her as this brown person, and then she's in this outsized body. I mean, I don't think this is too much of a giveaway. Tell us, because I know you know this, what that first line in the book that gives a sense of who she is and how she sees herself.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that line. It's, as long as I worked on the book, it wasn't until I had written large portions of it, and then when I went back and got those first two sentences, that Diamond crystallized for me. Like, I knew who she was. The first two lines are, the summer that I turned 16, I am so fat I can't ride my bike anymore, so I let it get stolen on purpose. And
that says so much.
It does. I mean, it says that she is desperate, that she is at a crossroads, but that she also still has agency. And she is clinging to, the fact that she can still make choices even in this moment of desperation. And so that, to me, that was her voice right there in those two sentences.
Oh, that's powerful. Hey guys, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole, and we are talking to Essie Chambers. Her debut novel has just dropped. It is called Swift River, an excellent read. And Essie, it was listed, it's on a lot of lists right now.
Yes.
But who was it who said this is one of the 24 novels that you have to read this summer?
Most recently, the New York Times. That was this weekend, which is great.
Yes. Yeah, and I saw that you got a really nice shout out on the Today Show from Jenna Hager Bush. Good for you. I mean, and well deserved.
Thank you.
Well
It's
deserved.
actually a Today Show book club pick. So it's a
Okay.
Jenna. It's a Jenna reads. It's part of her book club program. So I got that shout out, and then I'm going to be back on the Today Show sometime at before the end of the month to do an interview with them as well.
Wonderful. That is so good. You know, another thing that I find interesting in the book, you just in terms of class, we are talking about people who are very poor.
Yeah.
Very poor. As you say, it's a crumbling mill town. So Diamond and her mother are not the only people who are poor, but they come across as in more dire straits than many in this poor town.
Yeah.
How did you learn just to go deep inside of what that world is and really capture it? What was that research like for you?
Oh gosh, it's like, I think it was a combination of a world that I knew. I mean, I didn't grow up in that kind of poverty, but there were certainly people around me that were having those experiences. And so some of it was research, some of it was just really imagining what it is like when I think when you are as poor as this family, your world is small in a way, or their world was small in a way, because they are focusing on the fires in front of them at all times. And it's very hard to have perspective on a bigger picture about life, about dreams and wants, when you are constantly fighting fires to survive. And so I think it really was also just empathy, just sort of trying to empathy for that kind of situation. And I did a lot of that through food and hunger and the ways that my character especially used food to numb herself and the pain that she was going through, and what it felt like when they didn't have enough food, and what it means to come home and the lights are off, and all these things that are just kind of a part of their daily existence.
Yeah.
I think it ups the and I tried to do it in a way that it's just texture. It's not the point. This is not about their struggle to survive. It's just that is the life that they're leading. And as part of the frame of the story, they are, it's been 7 years since the father disappeared, and they don't know if he's dead or alive, but they're trying to get him declared dead so that they can collect his insurance policy, because that is going to be a game changer for them. And I know a lot of people that where life insurance policies are, that's the inheritance,
Absolutely.
And so the stakes, it just makes it so that the stakes couldn't be higher. Even though it ends up that's not the point. That's the premise.
Yeah. And I also like how you show their humanity. So you mentioned they don't drive. Now the bike is gone, so they have to walk wherever they're going or hitchhike. And there's a moment early on in the book where you see the pride. And, I was late for this meeting, whatever made up story there was, but it was far and they were walking and it was hard and somebody didn't give them a ride, whatever it all was. But I love in the storytelling that while they were in a dire situation, they have pride. They have pride in who they are and tried to make the story not quite as bad as it was.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think again, because this is their you have to find joy, you have to find your, like you said, your sense of pride, your a kind of integrity that comes from winning those small battles that might be as simple as getting from A to B.
Right.
And it's interesting, that scene that you mentioned. I also, I think in their struggle, there are people that read that scene. They're trying to get to a lawyer's office, and the mother ends up right putting her in a grocery cart, and to get her there. And there are people that read that and think it's one of the funniest scenes in the book, and then there are other people that tell me it's one of the saddest scenes in the book. And that is the line that I am always trying to. That makes me happy that there are those two ways to look at it, because
Yeah.
joy and pain live side by side,
And the not only does the mom push the daughter in the grocery cart, but it's a converted grocery cart that another person in the neighborhood that belongs
yeah,
to somebody else.
that's right.
And so just the depth of detail is, again, what I love so much, because you see the whole story, and then the story behind the story of just that one little object, which again just shows recycling, shows all the different things, that how we repurpose things in a community when nothing can be discarded because you don't have anything.
That's right. That's right.
And that level of attention to detail is why, for me anyhow, I'm paying attention to every sentence, because it's juicy. And I get, and to your point, Essie, I could see how you could just read fast, but you're going to miss so many details if you do.
I think, and especially I think with writers, writers have told me that they really like to sit with
Savor
those.
it. Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's great. Now, this story talks about race, identity, family, history, and legacy. There's a whole letter writing or reading, sharing that gives more dimension to the story. Why were letters important, and why was that a device that you used in this book?
I am not an epistolary girl. That wasn't, I didn't start off that way. I think the first letter writer I introduced, it was the relative of Diamond's, the Black relative that she never met before. And I think I'd said before, this started off as a kind of coming of age, and I realized, she was wanting to escape this town, but I needed something more than her running from it. She needed something hopeful to run towards. And so that's when I created the character of her aunt. And I wanted the aunt to be delivering information that you could see in ripples in her life, but that wouldn't make the car turn around. Like I didn't want it to be a dramatic plot device. I just wanted there to be these, like you said before, the kind of layers of story. And so, and I wanted each of these letter writers to have their own stories too, their own complete arcs in the book. And I felt like it was the perfect way to have those complete arcs and also speak across time, speak across generations. And so, there was a letter from the aunt, and the aunt introduced this ancestor named Clara, letters from this ancestor named Clara. And the way that Clara came to me, it was also in the course of research, and in something around, the Sundown Town, I think it was probably in the Sundown Town book, I read that sometimes exceptions were made for one or two people who were, like sort of like the town Negroes, essentially, like who were domestics or serving some essential function. And I realized, it would be powerful to have Diamond descended from the one person who was allowed to stay behind after the rest of the Black community was chased out. And so that is how Clara was born. I knew that I would make her, I would be able to tell two different kinds of stories of being the only one through Diamond and through these letters.
Across time.
Across time, exactly.
So
Exactly.
in terms of character development, you said this took 9 years. I believe you said you started with Diamond, but in
Yeah.
your research, these other characters emerge. Just so many people who are part of my community want to write books. And
Mm.
this is so fascinating to me. So, like, in your process, what happens to you when these characters emerge?
Oh, it's a great question. The first thing I think I should say, it's like, this is 9 years. It is so many different versions of me over 9 years. It's
Yeah.
so many, one version of Essie wouldn't have written the thing that another version of Essie wrote. So in that way, I think, it was meant to take the time that it was meant to take. But I think Diamond I always knew that I was going to write a story about the only person of color in an all-white environment. I didn't know what form that was going to take.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she started out as a short story. And as I started to think about, and this comes from, also from television development, as I started to, someone said to me, this is a novel. This is not just a short story. And then you start to think, what are the things that will make people want to keep going? What will sustain this over the course of an entire book? And so I think, Diamond being in a bigger body didn't come along until later. But I think as she became clearer as a character to me, the diamonds of the world are not often centered in stories. And so, I wanted to create a person who people could empathize with, that they didn't necessarily pity, but that they could really, walk in her shoes. And yeah, I'm trying to think of, I went back to that was a big thing. So I went back to grad school. The last exec job that I left,
So you left your career and went to grad school. It wasn't you had already started working on this book, but this was a big pivot for you.
It was a big, I was still, so I left my last exec job and I started independent producing. So
Okay.
I was independent producing.
Mm-hmm.
I was still doing TV and film, but I felt it was that thing. I don't know if you have this. It's like, I started to feel like my time was running out, and this was the one thing for me that if I didn't do before I died, that would be my one regret, my biggest regret. Wow. And so I understand from making TV and film, for me, a community works. A writing, like a creative community, is what I really need. Mm-hmm. And I had the beginnings of one when I was still working in television. I adapted a book by the writer Jacqueline Woodson.
Sure.
And it was an incredible experience. And she and I became friends. And she started a writing group for a bunch of her friends. Linda Villarosa was in the group.
They're like best friends. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it was all people who were not tending to some part of their creative selves. And she said, I want you all to stop talking about not writing these things and write these things and have each other. And that was the permission I needed to give myself. It was when I started thinking of myself as a writer, and when I developed a writing practice, because that's the thing is
yeah, writing. You can't say you're a writer, you have to write.
You have to write a lot of bad stuff.
Mm-hmm. You do. And it's great to have smart people that you're in community with, that you can, and that you trust, who you can share your writing with. Otherwise it's harder.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was my first writing community. And I think, I still, it took many more years for me to decide to go back to grad school. Mm-hmm. But that was, I wanted to be surrounded in that kind of, I just remembered like being in academia and what that did for me. Mm-hmm. And I think I started the seeds of Diamond and the story were in that writers group that I had, but the novel, I really started working on the novel when I was in grad school.
Makes sense.
And not everybody needed to write a book, but that was what I needed.
And we're glad you did. It certainly has worked out. Let me remind folks, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking with Essie Chambers. She has written a novel, Swift River. It is an incredible read. I want you all to think of it as a slow read, like you want to savor it. You can read it fast, but I don't want you to do that because you'll enjoy it that much more if you savor it. Essie, there's something that, as I was reading, the community that you show us in Swift River is a community that very often is invisible, particularly poor white people. Like if you look at movies, if you go to other places in the world, when they see American television and movies, you would think that most people are rich, white, skinny, and beautiful. You don't really see poor white people often. So you took us into this community that is relatively invisible and then put another person who would be invisible, either invisible or sticking out like a sore thumb, Diamond, this Black person, poor Black are kind of invisible. They're either invisible or that's who everybody thinks Black people are, right?
Yes.
I feel like this question of visibility and identity is something that you explore in ways that challenge our normal thinking. You're showing us something that we don't normally see. So can you talk about visibility, invisibility, and what that meant for you in creating this community?
Sure. I love that what you were saying about, I always say it's like you feel like you are simultaneously invisible and also on fire at the same time in that kind of environment when you were a person of color. I think the white community, there was a long time that I resisted leaning into race with this book, and then when I finally did it, the book cracked open for me. And I was reading at the time, I think I was reading *Citizen* by Claudia Rankine, and I was very moved by the way that she talked about microaggressions coming from people that she knew and loved, and colleagues and friends, and so. The first decision I made about the white people in the book was that they were not going to be cartoon characters. Like Diamond, they are going to make Diamond's life difficult, but in a far more nuanced way, I think, because of their own perceived otherness. To your point of them being, and so. Diamond is moving through this world with people who are hurting her every day in the way that microaggressions work, but she wants to belong so badly that she is going to swallow all of the stuff that's coming her way. And I think, the one person that she, over the course of the book, she makes a friend, and that friend is also a kind of an outsider who's invisible in that community as well. So
it's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating. Identity is always fascinating, but this sense of being seen and how you're seen, I think that all of us grapple with this.
Yes.
Throughout our lives, because as you were saying, the Essie today is not the Essie when you first started this book. We change.
That's right.
We change, and yet sometimes visibility, we have this thing that goes back and forth with being visible or invisible and how it feels even. So having the epistolary part of the book helps to anchor, I think, it helps to anchor Diamond because she's not alone. She's got
That's right. She figures, that's right. She's not alone in the world anymore. And I think, my hope is that you can see her slowly kind of filling up with it as the book, as the book progresses. So, the other thing is, talking about being seen and not seen. This is a 16-year-old girl. I think, if you think about being that age, it's all you want is to be seen. You want somebody to have a crush on you, or, and you feel things so strongly at that age. And I love telling. I one of the first TV jobs that I had was telling stories for that age group for a Nickelodeon channel. And
got some training in that too.
Got some training in that, because it's like, yeah, I mean, the amount of drama that you can mine from
teenagers.
Yeah. So yeah, she's primed for that kind of exploration of invisibility and desire to be seen for who she is.
It's so funny you say that. My daughter is now 20, and she was telling me the other day about remembering when she was 17 and how she and her friends were absolutely boy crazy. Nobody was paying attention to them the way that they wanted, but they were just, hormonally losing their minds. Yep. And everything was so important and so immediate. And why don't you understand? And now, just 3 years later, she's like, oh, it's like she became a woman.
You forgot all that. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like everything. It's like forever and never. And, it's the best day of your life and it's the worst day of your life. And yeah, all of it.
It's all the things. Okay. I want to talk about Descendant, because it's such a powerful documentary. I remember when Barracoon, Zora Neale Hurston's book, came out so many years after she had passed away, and about this community that a lot of people never heard of, Africatown.
Right.
And that it's true. So this is a true story. Tell us what is Descendant about, and why did you choose to get involved in it?
Well, so I actually met the director, Margaret Brown, at a writer's residency. I was kind of working on the book at the time, and she was working on some writing, and she'd done another movie in this community many years ago that was about segregated Mardi Gras. And in this movie, it featured, she didn't fully understand it at the time, but descendants of the people that were on the Clotilda, and descendants of the ship's captain and the evil slaver who brought them over. They were
She had done this already?
She'd done this already. Project. This was a different project. So she was already connected to the community. She was from that community. She was connected to the community. And really, when I entered the project, much of it was about the search for this ship, which was the last known slave ship to bring, kidnapped Africans to America. And just to sort of tell the story briefly, the slave trade, slavery was still legal, but the slave trade had been outlawed at that point. So
the global slave trade.
The global, so it was, punishable by death, actually, what this particular voyage. It happened because one man made a bet with another man that they could get one last shipment of humans. So that's how it started. And 110 souls came over, and they Timothy Mayer is the name of the man, and they burned the ship so that they could destroy the evidence. And so the movie, and I'm giving you very, very, this in broad strokes, but the movie started out, when I joined, it was about the search for this ship. But really, it's about the resilience of this community that are descended from the people that were on the ship. They all live in Africatown, and that's the Barracoon in the Zora Neale Hurston book. She interviewed one of the last living people that came over on the boat, a man named Kuja Lewis.
And to see that footage is just, it's so powerful to see this elder who came from, where did they think it was Ghana?
Benin.
Oh, excuse me, from Benin. Mm-hmm. And he's so regal.
Yeah.
And self-possessed. Zora Neale Hurston was so brilliant, and her love of our people was so incredible that she just spent so many years with such dedication to capture our stories. And you see that through just this footage.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that a lot of people didn't realize that she was an anthropologist,
Yeah.
so that was the work that
Because
she
we
was
know their eyes were watching God, and we know her. A lot of people just know her because she wrote that book. Forget
right.
all the other stuff, but
No,
she
she
wrote
was,
that as an anthropologist.
and in the work that she filmed a lot of this, she was essentially the first Black female filmmaker. I mean, all that footage exists, that gorgeous footage that you see in the film, and Barracoon only came out a couple of years ago because they originally wouldn't publish it because it was all in dialect. So yeah, so I had heard of Barracoon, and I was I went with the director to Africa Town and kind of just fell in love with this community. And you said before that Kojo Lewis seemed regal. I mean, these descendants are. I mean, you want to talk about like ancestors moving through. I mean, they are. You feel like you are in the presence of royalty. It is.
That's so beautiful.
It is absolutely remarkable, and a lot of what I think inspired me as I was writing, because I these projects were happening kind of at the same time, and I definitely in conversation for me, because I was watching what it meant to really understand where you came from, exactly where you came from with these folks in Africa Town. And when they, it's a spoiler, but it's pretty widely known, they found the ship. I mean, that was proof of the story that they'd been telling for generations.
Yeah, that it wasn't mythology. It was
not mythology. It was it's like oral history is not a lesser history. That is often how actual history gets carried down. And and that was also another sort of connection for me, I felt like, because with sundown towns, that a lot of that proof of a sundown town came from oral history, along with census data. So yeah, and just the resilience and the insistence on telling their story and passing the story along.
And one of the things that I saw in the film that resonated was these people who are descendants of Africans who came there. Yes, there was slavery, but they know who they are descendants of. There's something in the film that talks about the difference in their self-possession to people who were born into slavery. That there is a difference. There's an empowering difference, that they were free. They knew what freedom was. And so they taught their children and grandchildren and generation to generation what freedom was. Where
That's right.
people were born into slavery had a completely different understanding because they didn't have the understanding of freedom at first.
That's right. I'm so glad that that part is really what moved me, is that the when they were freed, they tried to go home. They tried to get enough money to go home, and they couldn't. And so then they decided to create this community. And what fascinated me about Africa Town is its Africanness. It was tribal, the way that they set it up, and it was a flourishing community that had its roots in traditions and in African traditions and culture. And they were outsiders. They were the only people in history who were free people after having been born free, to your point.
Yeah, no, it's really powerful. Hey guys, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are going in deep with our guest today, Essie Chambers, whose new novel, Swift River, was just released. And right now we're talking about this film, Descendant, which you can watch right now. Because I watched it on Netflix in preparation for talking to you. There are so many stories, Essie, that are unknown about both triumphant stories and otherwise. That I've been talking to a woman who was imprisoned as a child in a stockade in Georgia. People don't know that story.
Mhm.
People know a few stories that made the national news because of the strategies that King and others and Snick uh, made the stories get on the news. But the endless indignities that our people suffered, that most of all are unknown, will just knock you down. And we know our from our elders, a lot of times they don't tell the stories. You ask, well, what was it like when you grew up, wherever you grew up? And they'll smoke that pipe and not answer the question. Children should be seen and not heard, whatever. They don't tell the stories. They often don't tell the stories, which is why you, as a storyteller, this is so important, to tell the stories, whether it is a true story or a fiction story, but it's telling parts of our history that give a glimpse into what life has been like.
That's right. And also insisting that that our elders tell us our families, my father, before, he passed away a couple days before my book was sold.
Oh,
Which was, yeah, but listen, I feel him through all of this.
I'm
Um,
sure you do.
he was the last person in my family who lived in the Jim Crow South. I mean, who knew what it was like to live in the Jim Crow. He didn't.
Right.
And so luckily he was a storyteller, and his brothers were storytellers, and I got to sit at their feet on porches and in living rooms as they told the same stories over and over again, because how
Yeah. But that's
um,
why you know them, because they were repeated.
That's right. But that's oral history. Those aren't just family stories. That's oral history.
It is
And it
so
is so. I
true.
mean, I learned that on Descendant. If nothing else, we have to tell our family stories.
I absolutely do. So what's next? I know that this is the book tour, and you're going to have this incredible full experience with this book.
Yeah.
And
I want to start working on my next book. I mean, that was the great lesson for me. I think it took as long as it did because I was agonizing over the sentences, but also because I think I was afraid to be finished. Do I have more stories on the other side of it? And this well is not going to dry up. I mean, I have so many more stories I want to tell. And so I do have an idea for my next novel. I'm not ready to say what it is yet, but the
no,
characters are they're all alive in my head. And I decided that I want to, part of the premise puts them in another country. And so I want to go live somewhere and write the book in another country. So we'll see if that works out.
sounds very nice,
But
especially
I
now
want
that you're traveling again.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so as a filmmaker, do you see Swift River as a film?
I think it could be. I mean, this is a tough market to sell a film with, that is a period piece. But I saw it as I was writing it. Like I could see it, and I definitely think it could be a film. I do, and other people who've read it have said the same thing. I don't know.
I saw it from the
Yeah.
first page because you see everything.
Yeah.
And when you see everything, you want to see it.
Yeah. That would be nice. So that would be nice. I don't know, that would be a great thing to happen next as well.
Well, so part of what Dreamleapers is I bring people on who share how they are manifesting their dreams. And the one thing that I know for sure is if you claim it, then all kinds of magical things happen to make it happen. So put it out there. Why not? I'd love to see the film, and I don't think I'm the only one.
I'm putting it out there.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, congratulations. Swift River is an excellent read, and I know everybody who picks it up will enjoy it. I hope you have fun on this tour, because being able to talk about your book with people who are interested is really wonderful after all that work.
It's a gift. It really is. Thank you. And thank you for having me on here to talk about it. I really
Absolutely
honored to be here with you. You are a legendary writer yourself. And I really appreciate you having me.
Well, thank you. And good luck to you.
Thank you.
And everyone, thank you for joining in. Wasn't it wonderful talking to Essie Chambers? Go pick up Swift River now. You're going to love it. I promise you will. And until next time, have a great day and make it count.